question 10. What is the 5-step evaluation process that Social Security uses to determine disability? Okay, so Social Security uses a 5-step determination process, which they call the sequential evaluation. Sequential means one after another. So the first step of the 5, where Social Security uses to decide if you're disabled, is, are you working? If you are working and you're making over a certain amount, which they call SGA, substantial gainful activity, then Social Security is going to find that you are not disabled. The amount of money that they consider to be SGA is online. Just Google Social Security SGA and you'll be able to find that number. This year, it's $1,620 gross, which means before taxes, for individuals who are not blind. If people, for individuals that are blind, the amount is higher. So SGA, the first question is, are you working and making over SGA? If you are, you're not disabled. If you are not, if you're not working or not working over that amount, Social Security is going to go on to step 2 of the sequential evaluation process. Step 2 is, do you have a severe condition or conditions, maybe more than one? So what do they consider to be severe? It has more than a minimal impact on your ability to perform work-related activities. It's a term of art is what we call it, meaning it's a defined term. So Social Security is going to ask, a person could have a condition like, for example, diabetes or hypertension, or, there's a number of conditions, degenerative disc disease in their back, disc problems. So people can have conditions. Most people do have a condition. A lot of people have, someone could have anxiety, someone could have depression, or, whatever. There's a range of diagnoses. A diagnosis alone, unless it's a compassionate allowance case, does not mean that someone is disabled. However, it depends on how that diagnosis impacts you. Is it severe? Does it have more than a minimal effect on your ability to perform work-related activities? So, for example, someone with diabetes could, have insulin. They could have, regular appointments with their doctor. They're getting their blood sugar checked, and they could be stable, with their diet, with their medication, whatever. And they could be stable and they're working, and there's, not a significant impact on their daily activities. But a different person, even with medication management, with insulin or metformin, whatever they take, they could have their sugars be out of control, so much so that it, makes them dizzy, fatigued, disoriented. It could, start to have other secondary diagnoses like retinopathy, neuropathy, those sorts of things. So you could have 2 different people with diabetes, and one person could be significantly impacted and the other person not so much. So do you have a severe condition? So it's not necessarily the diagnosis itself, but how does that condition impact you? So if you do have a severe condition, moving on to step 3. Step 3 is whether you have a condition that meets or equals the listing of impairments. Social Security has a listing of impairments, different body systems. So your, cardiovascular, your heart system, your pulmonary system, which is the lungs, mental, different mental conditions. So your musculoskeletal, meaning your back. So they have a listing of different kinds of impairments and criteria under them. So say, for example, if somebody has a heart condition, there's a specific listing that looks at, well, what's their ejection fraction? If their ejection fraction on testing shows that it's particularly low, that person will meet that specific listing if the other criteria is met. So it gives specific criteria, usually based on testing or other, other criteria that they have. It could be frequency of certain things like asthma attacks or something. So same for seizures. So depending on what the condition is, Social Security has criteria. And if you meet the criteria as evidenced in your medical records, then you may be found disabled at step 3, and you have to go no further. You are found disabled and you need a listing. So what if you don't need a listing? A lot of people don't because it's very strict criteria. Then Social Security is going to make an assessment and then move on to step 4. So the assessment they're making is, okay, so this person has these conditions, diabetes, seizure disorder, and anxiety disorder, say. So Social Security is going to say, okay, well, what's this person's residual functional capacity? What are they capable of? They're looking at your limitations and they're going to decide what you're capable of despite these conditions and the limitations that are presented. And they're going to come up with a residual functional capacity. An example of that might be, this person, because of their seizure disorder, their diabetes, and their anxiety, they have the ability to perform seated work, meaning sedentary work. They cannot balance, they cannot stoop, they cannot bend. They have to do simple routine tasks. And they may need to call out of work unscheduled 1 day per month, based on the frequency of their seizure disorder. So that could be what we call an RFC, a residual functional capacity. So then moving on to step 4 is, given that those are the limitations of the person, can they perform their past work? So in this situation, depending on what they do, maybe they can do their past work, right? Say, for example, they are an assembler. It's not a real job. They don't even recognize this as a real job anymore. But say an assembler, we put parts together. This is something, for us old timers that have done this for many years, this is a job that they used to say existed. So that would be sitting somewhere and putting parts together. So there would be some vocational witnesses at hearings that would say that even if you weren't able to work once a month, you could still hold a job as an assembler, which is simple routine work and it's, seated. So that's, a thing of the past, but that's just an example for purposes of our conversation here today. So can you perform your past work? You know what your past work is. So you have to think about it. What are you capable of? Can you do your past work? If the judge decides, no, you can't do your past work, or Social Security at lower levels decides, no, you can't do your past work, then they're going to move on to step 5. Can you do other work? Okay. So other work. What other work are they going to consider? So this is where your age becomes a factor, and that's important. If you're 50 or older, they may not even need to go to your other work. They may see if you have transferable skills, depending on your age again and what they find that you're capable of doing. But when they're looking at other work, they're looking at other work in the national economy. That means in the whole United States. Is there other work that you could potentially do? So how they figure this out is they look at vocational, testimony, vocational witness testimony if you're at the hearing level. And at lower levels, the initial application and the reconsideration level, they're looking at the Department of Labor's Dictionary of Occupational Titles. So the Department of Labor has an actual dictionary where everything is coded. All different jobs are coded. It's very old. And there's a lot of controversy around the use of the Dictionary of Occupational Titles because it hasn't been updated in many years. However, nonetheless, Social Security looks at the Dictionary of Occupational Titles along with other resources to decide if there's other work out there in the national economy that you can do given your severe impairments and the limitations that are presented by them. So I hope you find this information helpful. This is the 5 steps Social Security uses to decide whether or not you're disabled. See you on the next one.